Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Chalk Talk podcast brought to you by catwizard.io. Wow, it's been a little bit here. We're so glad to be back with you all, providing a lot of content here before the holiday season. With me is my host, or co-host, I should say, Adam Pans. How we doing, buddy?
Oh, absolutely wonderful. Great to hop in back here with you. Took a little bit of time off, but we'll get to that later on. Yeah, as always, happy to be here. Happy to be talking hockey.
Oh, hell yeah. Couldn't agree more, buddy. We got a lot to discuss. Mainly there's plenty of exciting updates with the new Four Nations Faceoff rosters being dropped last night. We are filming on Thursday, December 5th. There's been quite a lot of back and forth between ourselves and many other analysts in the space in regards to who got snubbed, who's a great fit, who might be wearing the C on each team. So we got a lot to talk about. But let's first cover some of the news that we have missed, or I guess we haven't covered since our last podcast. Of course, there's been a ton around the hockey world, but some of the biggest news. We'll start off with the Boston Bruins. About a few weeks now, Bruins fired their head coach Jim Montgomery. Now we know what they've been doing as of late with the recent firings of a few other head coaches. But all three of these head coaches have had incredible resumes. In fact, Jim Montgomery put up 120 wins, 41 losses, and 23 losses in overtime. I mean, that's like an impeccable resume. And, last year and the year before, producing some incredible results. I think it was a matter of time with the shaky start that something needed to change, and unfortunately, I think that was the scapegoat. I do not believe by any means that was the issue. I know that a lot of players, after hearing about it, we've talked about how all the players kind of that it hit them a little harder than maybe expected or some others would. They understood that they were mostly at fault. This team is good enough and should have been good enough to potentially save him the loss of his role. But I think it was like 4 or 5 days later. Here comes Armstrong and the Blues. They swoop in and they hire him as their head coach. So I know you're a Bees fan, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Anything you'd add? And then we can kind of go into Joe Sacco and what his role is like and what it was in the past and what the outlook is for the future of the Bruins here.
No, I thought you touched base on it pretty well. As you said, Joe Sacco's been with the Bruins since 2014. Assistant coach under the last three coaches, Claude Julien, Bruce Cassidy, and Jim Montgomery. All three Jack Adams Award winners as the best coach in the NHL that season. Um, I don't know if there's many assistant coaches who have that stat, played, have coached under
That's kind
three
of
Jack Adams
wild.
Award winners.
That's wild.
Absolutely wild. um, so I hope he's able to bring a nice blend of those three great coaches, former Bruins coaches. So far, it's seeming to work. Bruins are 6-2 under Joe Sacco. Um, they're looking a lot better overall. Every single skater, just about. You have Nikita Zadorov scoring 2 goals in those 8 games. One was an absolute blast from the point with no traffic that just beat the goalie clean. Elias Lindholm had a 3 assist game the other week. So there are a lot of guys who are playing better already under Sacco. So it's starting to look like maybe NHL GM Don Sweeney really knew what he was doing, and he pulled the plug at the right time. And Sacco's looking like a good fit so far.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they still have work, of course, on that power play and some other things, but it sounds like the
Oh
fire
yes.
is lit under the Bruins because there wasn't one before this whole situation. So we're happy to see that the Bruins are over 500. They are, very much still in that, hey, we're a playoff team no matter what. And I think they're now walking the walk here. There are some other teams that have kind of fallen off a little bit, including the Jets as of late. They have not looked hot in the last week or
Oh,
so. But like the Bruins, like even like Dallas Stars, they know they're a playoff team. They just got to get to the playoffs. they're a team that's built for the playoffs, and we'll see. So, not to beat a dead horse, but we'll move forward from there because there's tons of stuff we want to cover here. Um, Bigger piece of news here with regards to some injuries. So, two people, two massive elite talents in the league. Alex Ovechkin fractured his leg. In a game where it was an inadvertent knee to knee with a player from Utah. I do not by any means think it was malicious. We know how Ovechkin and Russian players tend to be with health, and I mean it's comical to me because the guy, I haven't seen him in a boot yet. A week after it happened, he was walking around like nothing happened, and earlier this morning he was fully laced up, fully geared up, and skating. Now, of course, I don't think when they were asked about these things, they still said, "Hey, our timeline's our timeline." But Ovechkin is looking great for having a fractured leg. I think it was his tibia, but it just falls into exactly what we talk about all the time, buddy. Russia, they're made like machines. They are studs. They are beasts. Even the empty netters guys are like, all right, we got to get something tested in his blood. He might be robotic or something. Because what on earth? Who does this? He's superhuman. And then another person that's actually looking up, which is exciting, is JT Miller. He took a leave of absence. The timeline was not established. But as of this morning, he was skating, which was really, really exciting to hear. Because that's a crucial piece to the Canucks. I don't know. We've had a debate with Pedersen and JT Miller being, not the best of duos together on that roster, and maybe what the Canucks need to do, in the next year or so, if they can keep those two on the same roster, whatnot. But it is always great to see one of your elite, talented players that are great for your roster and the success, and puts the puck in the net and can help on the D end. It's important to see them, coming back, and it's good to see him on skates again. Now, this I'll turn it over to you because there was some news out of the general manager's offices and with regards to Bill Daly. And I just wanted to kind of pass it on to you to break that down there, bud.
Yeah, like you were saying, some recent news, Bill Daly coming out saying they're going to be cracking down on tampering. Now, the timing of this quote was just after the Blues had signed Jim Montgomery, and though I believe the main subject of this news or was meant for free agency signing, I do believe the timing of it right around the Jim Montgomery signing also was a little bit of a hint towards tampering. But Bill Daly and the NHL are a little bit frustrated that at 12 o'clock, that first day of free agency, there are many intricate deals signed right at 12:01 that pretty much suspects, yeah, they were talking for a bit before that.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think you hit it nail right on the head right there. I mean, I think it goes all the way back. I mean, many a years. You probably list probably half the league who's done it in just the last 5 to 6 years. But like something that comes to mind to me was that Claude Giroux trade. It just there were so many intricate pieces, and at like 12:01 the trade got dropped, or sorry, the signing got dropped, and to me, I think it's great. I mean, you and I love free agency day. It's important that the integrity of the game is upheld. I think that the punishments are it's pretty steep for both the franchise and the player involved, which is really interesting because the player, now this is more on the player and his agent to, if you're going to do this, you better be careful. And if you're going to do it, you're going to get caught, and there is a consequence instead of a slap on the wrist. So we'll see how that kind of develops. I'm sure this offseason we'll get to kind of experience what that changes like because the last few free agency days have always been fun, but very chaotic that first few minutes and first hour of free agency. Now, one milestone that was reached. We have to, throw some respect. We covered some milestones in our prior episodes that are upcoming, potential to be met this year or the next. One of them was Vasilevsky getting to 300 wins. He not only was able to get to his 300th win, but he was actually the quickest goalie to ever do it. I mean, this is a really
Incredible.
important stat when you think about it from a goalie angle. Like Jonathan Quick right now is shooting for 400. He's been in the league, my goodness, probably 8, 10 years longer. And to me, he's been on a team in LA and now New York that's, for the most part, been in the playoff conversation their entire time that he's been out there. I mean, here, obviously, Vasilevsky's played on some great teams and was a crucial piece, if not the X factor, that helped win some of those cups for Tampa. But it's really great to see him winning. And we obviously are going to root for him to hopefully break 400 sooner than a lot of people might see coming. So, and then, hey man, let's cover some of
No,
the trades. There's only a
hey,
few trades. Whoa, what's up, bud?
I just wanted to comment on Vasilevsky real quick. He's one of the best goaltenders to ever do it. His mix of size and speed is just generally unmatched. There are not many goalies who are able to move like him at that 6'4", 6'5" size it is. He takes up the whole net. He's absolutely incredible. Some of the best reflexes of all goalies, and honestly, it's not just the Lightning team around him because, as you said, he definitely had many games where he carried them. So, one of the best goalies I've seen in my lifetime. I think he will definitely go down as a Hall of Famer. And being the quickest to 300 wins is definitely going to help secure that for him.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy the company he's among, right? Like, think about every goalie that you think of as the best goalie to ever play in the game, right? And I know goalie and playing has developed significantly throughout the years, but my oh my, he's among some elite company. So,
Oh, yes.
anyways, we will be. Let me move forward because we do have some more to cover. We will be covering two trades that happened. I really want to hear your thoughts on both, and we'll kind of discuss who we think won each, and then we'll dive into these four nations rosters, which is something I've been looking forward to, and I think many have been for months now. But the first trade comes out of Columbus. There's been some rumblings around about David Jiricek and their intent to potentially move him. First and foremost, I think we're all happy and proud to see the Columbus Blue Jackets performing at such a high level, and some of the young players coming out like Kent Johnson and playing so strong despite what happened, this tragic loss of Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason, as well as losing Line and not bringing too much of like an impactful player back. I mean, that's two incredible, talented, skilled goal scorers that can also play on the other side of the puck. That really, losing two guys like that and not having a replacement, that's not hard or not easy for any team. So, really great to see Columbus. But they traded David Jiricek to the Minnesota Wild with a fifth round pick for Damon Hunt, a first rounder, a second rounder, and a fourth rounder. So immediately, right off the bat, I like my personal opinion is that the Minnesota Wild won this trade. I think it's even though. I think the Wild won this trade because put yourself in Bill Guerin's shoes. Put yourself with the defense that you're working with out in Minnesota. You have Brock Faber, who's this young, talented stud defender. You have a few other players from a young stance like Boldy, Kaprizov, the Rossies of the roster. But now you have David Jiricek. And this David Jiricek guy really helps you kind of solidify that blue line there for the future. You're not putting all your marbles in, one or two guys to hope they don't, age out. These two young studs are going to be very, very, very important players even 3, 4, 5 years from now. Something else that I think is worth noting on that blue line is they have Brodeen as well, so they have a very defensive minded defenseman they have what they're putting together on the ice right now as the number one in the league. It's fun to see. So adding a guy like Jiricek is only going to help that. But on the other hand, you got a first rounder for Columbus. More draft picks, more youth, better system, continuously growing that ever evolving system that is Columbus's. Um, because they've had a great system, they have a lot of youth, and a second rounder, which is not to be slept on. Now they're probably going to be low first and low seconds, of course, if Minnesota keeps this streak up. But turning it over to you, want to hear what you kind of would grade this in terms of who wins or who got more out of it.
Now, I am happy, just like you, that Yurchek was able to get traded and possibly get more playing time or a chance in the NHL with a different team, the former sixth overall pick. He has a lot of upside, a lot of offensive skill, but quite frankly, I think Columbus really stole this one. Yurchek is 21. Once again, former sixth overall pick, but the other player involved in this trade, Damon Hunt, is only a year older, also very skilled, and he's actually played um, a little bit more AHL time, and he was actually an assistant captain to start out the year for the Iowa Wild. So I know Yurchek has a much higher ceiling, but Damon Hunt is pretty close, where I think the picks just really heavily favored Columbus for winning this trade. I know the Wild will most likely finish as a playoff team, so that first rounder will be most likely later than number 16. But a first, a second, and a fourth in exchange for a fifth round pick, with Hunt and Yurchek switching teams, I think this is a pretty heavy win for Columbus.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to kind of look and see what picks they make of them. I agree. I don't think a team loses this. I think if you're Minnesota Wild, you're
No.
certainly happy about it, though, right? Like you have quite a
Mm-hmm.
lot to look forward to with the future of your franchise, and Jiricek will only help that. Although, I see the other side. A first and a second and a fourth. I mean, you're getting two really good stud players and potentially, a sleeper guy in the fourth round, right? So there's a lot on that blue line, right? You have, oh my goodness, you have the Provorovs, the Seversons. I understand that no one in any situation is necessarily locked on that blue line for long term. I know Werenski's obviously a great piece there. He's probably their most long term bet lock in, but to me, yeah, it would be nice to see Jiricek play some time in the league. Maybe he just needs that trust. He needs a team to play with, and a guy like Faber on his line with Kaprizov producing is different than putting him on a line with someone else that might not grow his game. So we'll see. But want to move on to the next trade. I think this one's funny, a little funky one for a multitude of reasons. So I'm actually going to let you cover it. You can announce it and kind of give me your thoughts because I know we talked a little bit about this one and you're you have some opinions here.
So the other trade we're discussing today was between the Colorado Avalanche and the Nashville Predators. The Avalanche sent Justice Anunin and a sixth-round pick to Nashville in exchange for Scott Wedgwood. Now,
Backup for backup.
I'm very, yeah, and exactly. I feel very strong on this one, mostly due to age being the big factor. Scott Wedgwood is, I believe, 32, and he's played somewhere around 115 to 130 NHL games, I believe. And he is the definition of a journeyman. Now, he is a wonderful guy. Everyone I've ever heard talk about him say he's absolute class act, great guy to have in the locker room. But from a GM perspective, this one, in my opinion, was heavily favored towards Barry Trotz. You trade for a younger goalie, Noonan, who's 24. He's got some NHL time under his belt. He's definitely played enough in the AHL to secure his NHL spot. And you also get a sixth round pick for it as well, for, like you said, exchanging backup goalies, and not just that, getting a much younger one who could help your franchise for the future, with Saros also locked up for a long time. This could really benefit the Predators for a while, especially depending who they draft with that sixth round pick. But from a GM perspective, I really think Barry Trotz kind of stole the show on this one. Possibly could get a guy who can turn out to be a real solid NHL goaltender. Now, I think Noonan was getting a lot of misguided hate this season because when the trade went down, him and Georgiev had the exact same save percentage at 87.9, and quite frankly, that's a bit more acceptable from a backup than from your starter for a potential Stanley Cup team.
I'll give you
So
that.
I think the problem looks more to the team defense as a whole than the goalies just being the problem. So I don't see this as a big upgrade for the Avalanche. I think they're trying to fix the wrong problem, but we'll see how it plays out.
See, that's an interesting look at it. Like I don't disagree with you. Obviously, age is a big factor here, but I also don't think it was made like there's not a oh my god this won by a landslide. Like Justice Anunin, like to me, he hasn't proven himself in the NHL at all. He has had a pretty brutal rap sheet. I get it. You're right. That Colorado defense needs help. Offensively, that blue line's insane, but it doesn't seem defensively that they're buttoned up the way they need to. Or it really was a Noonan and Georgiev that were the issue. But how I look at it is that locker room, I bet that most people in that locker room would put money or feel more trustworthy in a guy like Scott Wedgwood in the crease right now than they would a Noonan. And I'm not saying that, again, this is an earth-shattering or groundbreaking trade for the franchise because they're both still probably going to be backups. I see Wedgwood's impact on Colorado being much larger this season than a Noonan's could ever be with Nashville just because they have Saros and there's no Saros equivalent in Colorado. So Wedgwood might have to take a 1A, 1B spot. If I were Joe Sakic and if I were Jared Bednar, would not feel comfortable relying on a 1A, 1B with a Noonan right now. I wouldn't even rely on a 1A, 1B with my starting goalie, Georgiev, right now. Now, they hold firm he's not the issue. You and I have both talked. I don't think this is the first goalie that's going to Colorado this season. My bold take is that Gibson's going there. Now, I don't necessarily know when and if that's definitely happening, but the way I see it is, and I would agree right now, if you were in a locker room, if you were in the Colorado Avalanche's locker room, you're Nathan McKinnon, and not just being the hey, we trust everyone on the roster. If you had a choice between Justice Noonan and Wedgwood, I would take 10 out of 10 right now, Wedgwood. Now, maybe we're completely off. Maybe the Colorado Avalanche's goaltending struggles will continue to go downhill, which, if that's the case, we now know then it's not the goalies, it's the team. Because at that point, you've had some new faces. It's maybe the system and how they're breaking things out in transition. But for a team to produce as strong as they are offensively, to be that much, I guess that terrible side of it on the other end is just bad. It's balancing on a bad way, right? You can't win these Stanley Cup playoffs or even a series in the Cup playoffs if you're losing 8-7, even if you're scoring 7 goals. So I'll turn it over to you for last thoughts on this, but it's really interesting.
I don't like battling with you too much, but I gotta argue for my boy Justice here. Last year, Georgiev and him were mostly the 1A, 1B. Also, Ivan
Provetstov, yeah.
Prosvitov. Yep, he was also in there as well. Noonan was the only goalie on the Colorado Avalanche last season to finish with a save percentage above 90%. On top of that,
Ooh.
it was not just a 90%, it was a 92.8. Yes, it's a smaller sample size, but that 92.8 is a better finish to the season than Wedgwood has ever had in his career. Georgiev finished last season with an 89.7, and once again, at the time of the trade, they had the exact save percentage. So I really think Anunin was just thrown under the bus here to try to cover up other issues and just blame it on the goaltending.
Oh
Now I know
man, I
they have
like that.
had a lot of people injured to start out the season, but I maybe it's just the goalie in me, but I'm really not a fan of the Noonan hate. He's a young goalie. He's shown before what he's able to do, and he will show us once again he
Hey,
can be an NHL goalie in my mind.
I love that. I love the stat you shared. Hey, there's no hate for a Noonan by any means. I'm looking at the stat that you said,
No, not from you.
928.
Not
He's
from you, the Colorado fans.
yeah, to me I see his, he put up 23 games in the A last year, 90%, 14 in the NHL, 92.8. Yes, again, I think you're right. It's definitely better than we've seen out of Wedgwood, maybe ever. But again, if I'm going into the playoffs right now, I don't think 14 game sample size and the brutal 87% save percentage that we've seen this year in the 11. So that's 25 games he has played in the NHL for the Avs. We'll not count the two from prior years, and but the last 3 years he has 25 games played. To me, I would, again, going into a playoff situation, want a guy like Wedgwood who's a little older and more experienced. They're both backup players. I don't think right now a Noonan takes Saros's spot at all. I think
Oh
right
no, not
now
in the slightest.
I think it was a good idea for Trotz. I think that's the first domino to fall out there. I believe currently they are totally in we should panic mode. I didn't think they should have, but now I would, if I were them, I would start panicking. And I don't think a Noonan's going to be that groundbreaking change, but I do see this as a win for both sides, is my point here. I like it for both ends because, yes, you do need to replace your young goalie pipeline that you lost Askarov. You fill in and Anunin in. That's great. He'll probably do better in a system that's always been pretty defensive, right? The Preds for our entire life have known to be a pretty defensive
Yeah.
minded team and a great transition
Yep.
team. Offensively, it follows, but they're not known to be the even the Colorado Avalanches or the Tampa Bay elite scorers. Now this year they should have been with their with their depth chart, but no, I think that he's going to do better in Nashville, and I do believe that the Preds, or sorry, that the Avalanche. I mean, they can only go up in goaltending with this situation. So I don't know. I really don't know how Wedgwood's usage will be, but we'll see. Looks like they're going to be leaning on him a lot this next week. So anyways, we will move on. That wraps up our trade segment. We are moving into the exciting new released, hot off the press, Four Nations Face Off rosters. So how we're going to do it is Pans and I are going to list each team, starting with Sweden. We're going to go Finland, then U.S., then Canada. We're going to go through the offense. We're going to go through the defense and then the goaltending. We're going to talk about who made the roster, obviously, with those lists, and then some snubs in each position that we think might have missed, or kind of debate who we think might have been a better fit there. And then we'll kind of move through the list there. So starting off with Sweden, I'll give us a head start with the forwards. So right now, their announced roster starts with Elias Pettersson, William Nylander, Philip Forsberg, Jesper Bratt, Elias Lindholm, Adrian Kempe, William Karlsson, Mika Zibanejad, Lucas Raymond, Victor Arvidsson, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Nyquist. So I'll turn it over to you, buddy. Any thoughts on this initial forward roster? Any player that stuck out to you as like, oh my goodness, this is they missed on this guy, or anybody who you think maybe didn't deserve, a spot that got one.
No, I think it's a pretty good Sweden forward group. The one guy you were missing out, the extra guy, Leo Carlson. We
That's
don't know
right.
how the lineups will look first game.
That's right.
Leo Carlson is in there. I think he's rightfully deserved. The only like possible snub I could really think of for this forward group would be Raquel out in Anaheim.
Or no,
He's kind of
he's Pittsburgh. But yeah,
Pittsburgh
I
now.
know what you're
Excuse me.
saying there.
Sorry.
Yeah, he
Yep.
used to be on Anaheim. Oh, I agree.
Yeah, but I don't. I don't think it's like a huge snub. I think it's those last couple cut. He was definitely probably the last one
Mhm.
to be let go from this forward group. But I think this is a great Sweden forward group, and I think this Swedish team is going to give us a lot of problems. But before I actually say that, I think we got to announce the rest of the team. So I'll keep going with the defensemen. We got Rasmus Dahlin, Victor Hedman, we have Gustav Forsling, Erik Karlsson, Rasmus Andersson, and Matthias Ekholm, as well as Jonas Brodin. I think that's a standout Swedish defensive group as a whole. I really think this team is going to give a couple of the other countries some trouble. And let me just do the goaltenders real quick, and I'll kick it back over to you for other snubs with defensemen and everything. In net, they're going to have Jakob Markstrom, Linus Ullmark, and Gustafsson out in Minnesota Wild. Um, Looking at it right now, with how this season's going, honestly, Philip Gustafsson could be the starter. In my heart, I think Ullmark might deserve it, but all three absolute solid NHL goaltenders. Great Sweden team. Uh, Anybody you think was left out?
No, I agree with you, man. It's a pretty overall good team. I would think this is a pretty buttoned up roster. I do see people like Leo Carlson making a pretty instant impact. I mean, to me, we know Carlson was named Eric Carlson, that is, as one of their first members. I have my opinion, but there are people like OEL, Oliver Ekman Larson, and even your Bruins guy Hampus Lindholm, who very well could
Right.
have been on that roster there. I know Lindholm's dealing with an injury right now. I'm not going to say that either of them totally deserves it more than Carlson, but we know that defensively Carlson has struggled in the worst way, and the offense has not been looking great either for him this year in Pittsburgh. He is right now probably the worst contract in the league, if not one of them, which is making it difficult to justify. But hey, the Darlene Hedman Forsling is just an insane trio. I like what you said about the goalies, Gustafson too. To me in this roster situation, and we'll cover it with some other teams, but you need two good goalies. Yeah, you get three. You need two.
Minimum.
You
Yeah.
need two, right? And I see Gustafson and Markstrom, at least coming off of how they're playing recently, as easy locks. Obviously, Ulmark has been up and down this season, but he deserves a spot too. International play, you never know with the extra space out there. I think Gustafson and Markstrom and Ulmark are a pretty damn good trio right there. Matching them up against some of these other rosters, man, I think you're right. These guys are going to
And
be
they're one or
shocking.
two.
They're going to
Yeah.
be they're going to be an interesting team to watch, and I think like people have slept on them before. They are a great program. The Swedish hockey program has always been strong for as long as we've lived, as at least, and I'm looking forward to seeing this roster, especially because people like Pedersen, people like Zibanejad, people like even Eric Carlson that can really potentially step up their game, find that second gear that they've been looking for this season because they have that extra space and maybe that extra time. So we're excited on Sweden, but we will move on to Finland. Moving on with Finnish forwards, the forward group that was announced for Finland. We have Arturi Lehkonen, we have Alexander Barkov, Mika Rantanen, Mikhail Granlund out in San Jose. He's been balling out. Sebastian Aho. We have Teuvo Teravainen. We have Capo Caco, which was a fun one to see on that roster. Rupe Hintz as a center. They have Patrick Laine, thankfully seeing him back on skates and playing for the Montreal Canadiens. They have Lou Strunainen out in Florida. They have Anton Lindell and Eric Howla. So that rounds out their forward line with also Joel Armia as an extra announced. You know what? I'm just going to give it to you right now in terms of who I think deserved a spot over these guys. And I'm not saying that this roster is not fully complete. I like their offensive roster. Again, another team that might be slept on. The big bad America and Canadian teams have always been the favorites. But, I mean, I look at guys like Kakaniemi and Eli Tolvanen as two players that really could help, not in a one or two line situation, but being a third or fourth line player. I really do like Capo Caco with Line and Hintz. If that is their third line, that'd be a really fun one. But to me, Howla's a little older. He brings in that penalty killer option. Louis Stranainen's very young, also a great two-way player out in Florida. But those two players to me stuck out as players that maybe, if they were replaced by Tolvanen and Kakaniemi, who knows? Maybe that style of play could be a better fit, but they were picked for a reason. So curious what your thoughts are. If you'd add anyone with that forward group that I missed, and then we can kind of go into defensemen and goalies.
Um, Honestly, I think this is a really good forward group. Quite frankly, I think 11 of those 13 forwards are pretty much locks. The only two I'm kind of questionable of are Eric Halla and Joel Armia. I do think some of the three guys you mentioned, and Kasperi Kapanen, Jesper Kotkaniemi, and Eli Tolvanen, could, I think, two of those guys could take the spots of Halla and Armia. And I know it's NHL experience based, but I love Yuri Kulich. I could also see him taking one of those spots. Still, overall, I think this is a great Finland roster. With Barkov, in my opinion, the best defensive forward in the world right now at the helm. And you have Sebastian Aho as your number two center, that if he plays center for the tournament. I think Finland, their forward group's going to give these teams some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, any of these rosters, their power play should be insane. But think about an Aho Barkov
Yeah.
Rantanen. Like that'll just be an unreal situation. But let's go into defensemen.
Line A in the 1T.
Yeah, oh my God. Let's go into defensemen. This is the D group that I do see as their weaker point. If there's a weak point in
Yeah.
Finland's roster, it's probably this, right? So defenseman Miro Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, Mikola out of Florida,
Or,
Rasmus Ristolainen, Valimaki, and Oli Mata. To me, you know, I don't necessarily have a snub that deserved a spot over these guys. I think there are some names around the league that very well could have been in conversation. But to me, I think obviously you have Heiskanen. He's a Norris caliber talent, certainly in conversation and can make an argument for his elite stature. Other than that, I don't see a stud defender on this team. I see Lindell as more of a defensive minded player. I see Nikola, who's very big, but I don't see him as like a threat offensively. I see Ristolainen, he has some offense to him, and honestly, this year he's shown more offense than we've seen in prior years. But I don't see a great two-way, transition on the blue line here aside from Heiskanen. There is plenty to be said about international hockey and some of these players who are familiar. Like Oli Mata has played for Finland for a while. Like he's a player that's used to the system. So I don't know. Maybe Yoki Haru out of Buffalo could have deserved a spot, but and then I'll mention their goalies, and then I'll pass it over to you, buddy. The goaltending, we covered the Predators earlier this podcast, but UC Saros, is one of the first goalies announced, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen out of Buffalo, as well as Kevin Lankinen in Vancouver. What I said last team with Sweden remains the same. You need two good goalies. I know that Saros, Saros is by no means the issue out in Nashville this year. I think Saros is one of those top tier, caliber Vezina Trophy finalists or potential finalists one day in his career. I believe that Saros is elite. I believe that Luukkonen and Lankinen are great goalies as well. Lankinen's having a hell of a start this year with Vancouver. I just any given day, right? So you never know. To me, I do see Saros probably taking majority of the starts here, but it is good to see. I don't think it's as strong as maybe USA's crease or even potentially Sweden's, but I'm going to give this a grade way higher than any of the Canadian goalies. So I like the goaltending crease for the Finnish roster here. But what would you add to the defensemen or subtract or anything I missed on the goalies either?
No, yeah, I think you actually hit it right on the head with Finland. Quite frankly, I think their defensive group um, is definitely weaker than their forward group that they have. I think they have a pretty solid D group announced, but there's not really. The only guy you didn't mention was Yanni Hakanpää.
Ah,
Um,
that's right. That's right.
and it happens. But I think this is a pretty good Finnish group defensively. Um, I don't think it's quite as strong as some of these other rosters. And goaltending wise, you were completely correct as well. UC Saros being one of the best youngish goalies in the league. A little bit smaller in size, but he makes up with it with athletic ability. UPL up in Buffalo, we both have loved Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen since we started watching him in World Juniors for Team Finland. Uh,
Oh
Great
yeah.
young goalie. I believe he's 24 now, and he's starting to really prove his NHL value. And yeah, Kevin Lankinen, incredible season. It's kind of crazy to think about that the Predators have both Saros and Lankinen. Um, but yeah, no, I think that's a really good goaltending group. Not quite the best. I'd have to agree with you again. Probably rank them at number three
Mm-hmm.
for goaltenders.
Rank them at three. I'd rank their defense at four. Um, from a standout stance,
Yeah,
I know we covered a few. You mentioned Barkov. I think Barkov's their X factor player. Um, I don't think this team goes anywhere in this tournament without Barkov, firing on all cylinders, both defensively and offensively. Yes, there's plenty of other people that will probably step up to the plate and take on big roles, but I mean it's clear that he needs to be on his game, and we'll get to watch that for Finland to obviously succeed. That's definitely going to be a major piece. So let's move into USA. I'll let you cover the forward group there, and we'll break it down from there.
USA forward group. We're starting it out with Minnesota Wild, Matt Boldy. We have Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, Jake Gensel, Jack Hughes, Chris Kreider, Dylan Larkin, Austin Matthews, JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Vinny Trocheck, and of course, the two Keith Kachuk sons, Brady and Matthew. I think this is a great top six forward group that they have. I think their third line is going to be incredible as well. But I think we had a couple of snubs trying to fill the fourth line roles with more fourth line role type players instead of some more skilled forwards like that of Tage Thompson, Jason Robertson, or the biggest snub for me was Clayton Keller offensively.
Mm-hmm. No, I like what you're saying there. To me, I like this roster. I see speed. First thing that comes to mind is speed. And then, not that these guys aren't speedy, but then I look at some of the last three names, or some of those names you listed last: Chris Kreider, Brock Nelson, and Vinny Trocheck. To me, it's what you said. The Tage Thompsons, the Jason Robertsons, and Keller, to me, are the three players that fit that perfectly. They are, I think they would be, to me, I'm not going to say it's a disgrace, but to me, I think from a skill stance and from a two-way play, I would want all three of those guys over Brock Nelson, Kreider, and Trocheck. The way I see Kreider, he's got 10 goals and 0 assists in 25 games. Yes, we know his caliber of play. But look at what Tage Thompson brings, being on the brutal Buffalo Sabres the last few years, putting up positive numbers in his plus minus. Obviously, the goals have spoken for himself. He's got the most goals behind Austin Matthews for any American born goal scorer, any American born player since the beginning of the 2022-23 season. I mean, that is a stat that I don't think people get. I mean, that's not a player you'd ever leave off. And if you're, a GM, I don't know. To me, I think those guys are misses completely. I would even make an argument to Brinket. It's clear that he did not like a small, quick righty because he left out the Brinket and Caulfield. Just because to me those guys are almost in the same stature and build, but incredible talents. I mean, Caulfield's got 16 goals this season, and he's got six more goals than Kreider does in less games, and he has more assists by a lot. I mean, it just to me, you're looking at a guy and you're playing on their past, which I guess is a good argument. But again, look at the past of Jason Robertson. He put up 100 points 2 seasons ago. He put up 90 the year. Like, to me, Robertson was highway robbery to not be on this roster. And for them to go with some of the players, to me, it's like, oh, geez. But what you said is also a factor in here. They're not building a team based off of the best of the best. They're trying to fit roles. Well, to me, if the USA team does not win, it's not because of lack of defense or lack of goalies. It's because of this fourth line or these last players that I don't think deserve the spot. Because you look at Eichel, Gensel, the Jack Hughes, the Kachuk brothers, the Connor. I mean, Boldy. These guys are all freaking on the way up as on the way up gets. They are climbing the trajectory of their career, and they're not stopping. They're not plateauing. You look at a guy like Nelson. I don't know. He's good out in Long Island. You see a guy like Kreider. Yes, he's good and was consistent for the Rangers, but he's certainly not climbing in his career. You look at a guy like Trocheck, also a player who has some good two-way style and some good face-off, and I'll give you that. But he's long into his career. I don't necessarily think he's the best fit, but maybe I'm wrong here. Let me move into the defense. I'm going to rate this defense number one, and I don't even think it's freaking close, buddy. I think Sweden's defense is number two. But looking at their defense, the blue line for the U.S. is pretty stacked. Starting with Brock Faber from Minnesota, Adam Fox from the Rangers, Noah Hannafin from Vegas, Quinn Hughes from the Vancouver Canucks, Charlie McAvoy from the Boston Bruins, Jakob Slavin out of Carolina, and Zach Werenski from Columbus. Now, before I turn it over to you, there is a funny story about Bill Guerin and Zach Werenski about giving him the notice of being on the roster. And it looks like a few weeks ago, he and one of the scouts for the USA team were out in Columbus to try and see what Werenski's game was like. And they actually ran into him at the same restaurant after the game. And Werenski's wife said something like, "Hey, I'll take the tab if you put Zach on the roster." And they looked at each other like, "Hey, we don't get to do this very often and talk to our players in person. Should we break the news?" And they agreed. So Bill Guerin looked at her and said, "Looks like you're paying because Zach's on the roster." So I just thought that was great. A lot of respect for Bill Guerin. A lot of respect for Zach Werenski and what he's done coming back from that injury. And just dealing with the roster and the situation out in Columbus and how good he's been, even despite having a team that's not been that great in the last few seasons. And then their goalie group, also ranking number one. I don't think it's even close in this regard. We start off with Connor Hellebuck, the ex-Vezina Trophy winner out of Winnipeg. We have Jake Ottinger out of Dallas and Jeremy Swayman out of Boston. Now, like I said earlier, you need 2 stud goalies. They have 3 stud goalies, 2 of which who are really hot this season. The third of which had a shaky start, but so did his entire team. I don't even think that third goalies, you might not see all 3 goalies get time these tournaments, but you don't need to worry about a guy like Swayman if a guy like Ottinger and Hellebuck are in front of him or whoever ends up getting the start there. So I'll turn it over to you because I want to hear if you have any snubs from a goalie angle or any defenders that you think deserved a spot that didn't on US because there's plenty of US talent right now and a lot to be talked about for sure.
Yes, like you said, incredible U.S. talent right now. This might be the peak of USA hockey and its history at this point with just sheer talent. Goaltending wise, I don't think it's possible to have a snub. Hunter Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, and Jeremy Swayman are 3 of the top 10 goaltenders in the world, in my opinion. And like you said, Hellebuck and Ottinger having fantastic starts to the season. Swayman, weird start to the season. Did not start out great for his first season as the full-time starter for the Boston Bruins. Since then, he did a little mini training camp with Bruins goalie coach Bob Essena. Since that, he has had a 93 save percentage in his last 5 games, starting to look like the Jeremy Swayman we know and love. But yeah, like you said, doesn't matter which USA goalie you go with, you have an incredible goalie in that. I have no idea who's going to end up starting for them. But yes, this is the #1 goalie group. The only one that's even close to competing with them is Sweden. Also a great goalie group there. But also, I gotta agree with you for the U.S. defensive group. And I swear we are not being biased here. But Brock Faber, Adam Fox, Noah Hannafin, Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy, Jakub Slavin, and Zach Werenski is an insane defensive group to have bringing to this tournament. I'm very excited. I think they're going to be leaning heavily on the play of Werenski and McAvoy and Faber and Fox. I think that'll most likely be their top 4. One of those guys may be swapped for Quinn Hughes, but great defensive and goaltending group. I think the U.S. has a real chance of taking everything home for this first Four Nations tournament. But I got to argue with the forward group. So though I'd agree that guys like Caulfield and DeBrincat are skilled enough to be on a Team USA team, um, I I see where you're coming from with the 3 names that you listed for Team US that you don't agree with Trocheck, Nelson, and Kreider. But those 3 guys fit a 4th-line role better than most US NHL players. And quite frankly, the other 10 forwards who were listed for Team USA who will be playing in the top 9 roles, they all beat out Caulfield and DeBrincat. In my opinion, uh, once again, we'll see what Bill Guerin thinks as the final roster is shown in February.
Mm-hmm.
But I can definitely agree with you. Guys like Tage Thompson, Jason Robertson, and Clayton Keller, those are extremely tough names to leave off this team.
Yeah.
But I think this is an incredible Team USA group. I still think this 4th line is going to be able to bring it. The top 9 that Team USA has is going to be incredible. So I don't think they have anything to worry about. I get being upset about the people who didn't make it. But I really think Aaron did a fantastic job of setting up for a 4-line group with a whole lot of skill in that top 9. And even that bottom line, they can still score. Check hard, forecheck, transition well, and bring good leadership to the locker room. I'm very excited to see what the lineups turn out to be when February rolls around. Quite frankly, we might be out there to see them. But I'm so excited for this tournament to come.
Yeah, man. I mean, I agree with you. To that same point, and we'll move on. It's like, to me, this is what really hit me. It's like thinking about it from the player's shoes, right? Like those three names: Brock Nelson, Chris Kreider, and Trocheck. They're probably more shocked that they made the team than they would have been hearing that they weren't. And turn it over to the Tage Thompson and Robertson. Those guys are probably completely shocked and almost disheveled to hear that they weren't on the team because they probably expected to be on the team. So I just think it like from that angle, yeah, you're building a roster, so you're right. Bill Guerin knows how to do that, and we hope that USA can bring home the gold this year. And of course, we're rooting for our boys in red, white, and blue. But to me, I just put yourself in those players' shoes. I mean, if you're Brock Nelson, were you really expecting the call that you were getting on the USA team over a guy like Tage Thompson who's buzzing right now? I would probably have been like, oh, word, okay. And Tage Thompson, I know, is not happy with it, and I'm sure a number of other players. And you know what, man? That's the toughest thing about being in U.S. and Canada right now. Obviously, Canada most of our life. It's like there's only so few spots. Guerin was one of the GMs who asked for 20, those two extra spots. I think it was 25. He asked for two extra players, which very well could have been Tage and Caulfield or Tage or Robertson or Robertson, whatever mix you want to add. But hey, it is what it is. You have to make those decisions. And with the team is, even take out those three players completely. You have three lines of sheer incredible talent. So I'm bullish on the USA team. Some standouts to me that are really gonna you know be X Factor players. It's Jack Hughes. I know you love Boldy, so we're gonna mention Boldy as well. But to me, you said it best. Their defense is a brick wall with Faber, Fox, Hughes, and Werenski and McAvoy. I mean, that five is hilarious. Almost how good they are. And then to me, the space is what's going to help the USA team. Think about guys like Eichel. Think about guys like Gensel and Jack Hughes, who are, and even Dylan Larkin, who are very speed players. I mean, JT Miller too, a guy you will probably not beat in a skating race. You give them more space, oh my goodness. And to me, Jack Hughes with his hands and that skating ability of his, oh my goodness. I think this is a recipe for great success. And it'll be really fun to watch him in an international tournament here with some of the best in the business. I'm looking forward to seeing who they put with Austin Matthews as well. I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah,
To me, there is a very, very large lack of righties on this roster. Another reason why I was confused about the no Tage or no Caulfield or I know Robertson and Keller are lefties, but I mean I only see Trocheck, who's probably not eating too many minutes, as a righty on the roster, and then the only other righty you have on that roster is Jack Eichel. Is Matt Boldy a righty or
forward
is he a
wise,
lefty?
he's a lefty.
Yeah, forward
Yeah,
wise, you
forward
only
wise,
have
you just have those two.
and that's crazy if you think about it. When you have so many righties, we always talk about how important it is to have a skilled righty, because they don't grow on trees very often. Now, anyways, let's move into Canada because Canada. Wow, there's been a lot of heated arguments and takes in who deserves what, and this roster is always so fun to break down because of just the sheer talent that comes from Canada. So I'll cover the forward group, and then I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts and snubs on that end, and we'll go into the rest. So the forward group starts out with Sam Bennett out of the Florida Panthers, Anthony Cirelli out of Tampa Bay, Sidney Crosby out of the Penguins in Pittsburgh, Brandon Hagel from Tampa Bay, Seth Jarvis from the Carolina Hurricanes, Travis Konechny from the Flyers, Nathan McKinnon from the Avalanche, Brad Marchand from the Bees, Mitch Marner from the Maple Leafs, Connor McDavid, McJesus as we call him, from the Oilers, Braden Point from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Sam Reinhart from the Panthers, and Mark Stone from the Vegas Golden Knights. Holy cow, that was a lot of players. That's a lot of talent. Any thoughts on this roster of forwards for Canada? Where we're grading this roster, how we think it's going to work, and maybe any players that deserve to be there that didn't get the nod there.
Uh, quite frankly, I mentioned some names that it's kind of a surprise that they are not on it. But to be quite frank with you, this is no bias to Bruins GM Don Sweeney, who is Team Canada's GM for this Four Nations tournament. I I think he got the best roster. I think he did a really good job of constructing this roster.
The full
Um,
roster, you really think so?
Forward group wise,
Okay.
there are a couple names who are surprises, but I think of the Canadian forward group, I think these are the best complete players that is going to give Canada a chance to win. And this is my favorite forward group going into the tournament by a long shot. Though I love Team USA and Sweden and Finland, how they're all set up forward wise, this is going to be an extremely fun forward group to watch. Um, a couple names that you could mention, for me at least, Steven Stamkos and Connor Bedard. I still am surprised neither of them made it, but I can't really pick any names to replace with those two guys. So
Hmm.
I'm happy with this team forward group, or should I say unhappy as a Team USA fan.
Interesting. So I agree with you. It's a hell of a forward group, but I see why Stammer didn't get there. I mean, the argument was being
Yeah.
made on Daily Faceoff this morning about how Hyman needed to be on this roster. I,
Mm,
for one, laughed at that. I don't think by any means Hyman earned that spot. I think the exact reason Hyman's not on this roster is the exact reason Stammer's not. They both have looked not good this year. Now, say what you will, he's a 50-goal scorer. Hyman very well could have been on this roster. But Sam Reinhart was also a 50-goal scorer and is also balling out this year. And Hyman is, yeah, coming off an injury, but he's now past that and has played with McDavid, doing the same thing he's known to be a net front warrior. And he's not nearly at all scratching the surface to what Sam Reinhart's doing. To me, a player that was not mentioned in this forward group that I think is almost insulting that he did not make was Dylan Strome. I agree, Bedard. He said it last night in the Bruins game. You sleep in the bed you make. He's not had a great start. He's going to use it as motivation. That is exactly as a Blackhawks fan what I'd want to hear. But if I look at a player who earned a spot on this roster, who isn't, it's Strome. You see guys like Hagel, he earned a spot this year. Sorelli, yeah, he also earned a spot, but he and Sam Bennett are both players that and even potentially Brad Marchand, you could make the argument, who haven't been at the same caliber of play as Strome has been. He has been exactly what Ovi and Backstrom used to be, and then some. He is very impressive, and right now, we said that Erik Karlsson might have been the worst contract in the league, certainly one of them. I am making the argument that Stromer is one of the best contracts in the league. It no longer is Zach Hyman. It used to be last year with that performance. This year, I love Travis Konechny on this roster. I love Mitch Marner and a lot of these other picks. But to me, I think they really did a disservice to Dylan Strome. And I know it's easier said than done to build a roster like this. Nothing against any of these players. They all got there for a reason. But I do believe that, oh my goodness, I'd make the argument that if there was one more roster spot, Strome would have to be the guy they put on there. Not Bedard, not Stammer, not Hyman, not even an extra defender. But let's move in to the defensemen of the Canadian roster. So the defensemen, starting off with Cale Makar out of the Avalanche in Colorado, Josh Morrissey out of Winnipeg, Colton Parayko out of the Blues, which I thought was interesting, Alex Petrangelo out of Vegas, Travis Sanheim for Philadelphia, Shea Theodore out of Vegas, and Devon Taves out of the Avalanche in Colorado. So those seven defenders. I want to turn it to you, buddy. What are your thoughts on this decor? How does it match up with, say, Sweden and US? Because we think it's still probably better than Finland. But who missed out? Who should have been there? Who might have gotten a spot that might not have, or might should not have gotten there over someone else? So I'll turn it over to you there, bud.
Quite frankly, I think the only defenseman worth mentioning who could have possibly got a spot would be Evan Bouchard. Though he is still a younger guy, I think he's definitely worth bringing for the trip. And who knows, with injuries, that could possibly happen. I think he would be the next guy taken. But overall, I think this is a pretty good, not stand out, incredible group, like you said, for Team USA and Sweden has. But yeah, I'd put them there at number three for the best defenseman group going into this Four Nations with this original roster that we have. Um, some good names in there: Kale McCarr, Petrangelo, Taves. Um, oh, but really, I see this group as three offensive defensemen who are real great and four two-way defenders who are good, solid defensemen, but I don't think it's as standout of a group as USA or Sweden.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Younger group in US for sure. I
Mm-hmm.
think the balance out in Sweden really helps them. Like they have the balance of different playing styles. Yeah, that's here with regards to Canada's blue line. You have the speed, the shifty two-way guys. You have the mainly offensive Morrissey. You have the Colton Parayko's and Petrangelo big guys. To me, I think Colton Parayko um, is that addition. I think Sanheim will definitely play a massive role in their play in their game. I think a player that very well could have been in this space over Parayko was Evan Bouchard. Not that he was, oh my goodness, scream from the rooftops, he got robbed, but Evan Bouchard is one of the best players in the offensive zone for any defender in the league. He's not the best. We're not going to put him up there with McCarr and Hughes, but his shot is incredible and his transition play is great. Not that Parayko's shot isn't good and his transition play isn't great, but I do believe Bouchard, if I'm building a roster, I'm picking Bouchard over Parayko. I just plain and simple. If I wanted a player on my team, I want Bouchard before I'd want Parayko. So we'll see how that plays out. Now to their goalies. This goalie situation to me is comical and will be the downfall of Canada. If there is a downfall for Canada, it's their crease. I mean, you look at the Nova Scotia line with Marchand, Crosby, and McKinnon. That'll be hilariously insane to watch. I mean, that talent in that locker room is insane. When you look at their crease, you're starting out with Jordan Binnington out in St. Louis, Aiden Hill for Vegas, and Sam Montembeau for the Canadiens. Now, before I turn it over to you, we talked a bunch about Montembeau earning a spot this year on this roster, and I do not disagree with that. Do I believe he was the fit there? I'm not going to say yes or no. Do I believe the other two guys are going to lead them anywhere? I do not believe they will. Now, there's been a lot of talking on who maybe could have been, replaced. I know two players that we had as snubs were Darcy Kemper and Flower was someone that I thought was almost a sheer fit here. If you look at goalies, I don't care if he doesn't, see an ounce of playing time. Flower's a hell of a player to have in the locker room. He's probably played with half of this, roster already from international play. He's a hell of a morale guy. He knows exactly what it takes to win on every stage. He's an elite talent, and I think you'd be better off with him in that locker room than a Jordan Binnington, who to me is just a hot headed player who's meh at best. Of course, he had that great season where he led them to the cup, and he'll forever be known as that guy who did that. And obviously, he deserves respect. He's in the league, and he's not a bad goalie. But I think
Mm,
the main player that we didn't even mention out of those three, because we mentioned Kemper and Flower, the person that would be if I were to put a starter for this Canadian roster, that I laughed when Sweeney didn't get this guy. Thompson. Logan Thompson
Yep.
out of the Capitals in Washington. I mean, this guy is balling out. It took like until last week for him to have a loss in regulation this season. The guy is insane. To me, you just basically you screwed yourself over. I mean, yeah, maybe these guys are a great team and a great trio in net, but you lost out on a really good old vet that can be a very strong role model, help in practice, help with morale, potentially come in an X factor spot and help in a crazy pinch. And then you got a guy like Logan Thompson who has been on this vengeance this year and last year, really, but definitely this year to say, hey, I want to go to the Capitals or I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get more playing time. Well, he did. He goes to the Capitals, gets more playing time, and boy, did he walk the walk after that. So to me, I think Sweeney really missed on this goalie, crease, and we'll see. But I don't think this crease at all is ready for international play. Plain and simple. So I'll turn it back to you to hear your thoughts. But I think Thompson and Fleury deserve a spot on this roster without a doubt more than some of these other guys. But what are your takes here, bud?
No, I agree with you there. Aiden Hill is the only goalie currently on Team Canada who actually deserves this role. And if it was my choice, I would have to go with a mixture. I got to pick the four guys. I know it would only be three to take, but Aiden Hill, Marc-Andre Fleury, Darcy Kemper, and Logan Thompson.
Darcy
Three guys
Kemper.
you mentioned.
Okay.
I think Hill definitely deserves it.
Yep.
Quite frankly, of my guys who would probably be sent home, it's either Thompson or Kemper. I think Flower really deserves that third role, if not maybe even the second, most likely the third. Um, just from everything he has done for Team Canada throughout his career. This is most likely his last season before he retires. I see almost no value brought to this team by bringing in Jordan Binnington and Sam Montembeault. No offense to those two guys. Little offense to Jordan Binnington. He's not a good person. There's no way, shape, or form that he is anything but a locker room cancer from what I've seen on the ice. Sam Montembeault, I can't really speak on him or his personality, but I cannot see him bringing any value to this team compared to a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury brings to every practice, in the locker room, on each and every trip. I I agree with you here. I do not see what Don Sweeney was seeing with this goaltending room. Um, Aiden Hill, great goalie, most likely be the starter. If he's not, I will be quite surprised. Big fan of Aiden Hill, but I do not understand Jordan Binnington and Sam Montembeault being on this team. Who knows? Maybe some guys rejected the offer, but it's honestly mind blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, none of this can matter if Aiden Hill plays every single game, which it looks like he will, in my opinion.
And he
But
could be lights out
I
too,
got to
you know?
touch back. He could. He's like that. He's a great, big, solid goalie, good reflexes. But to touch on your earlier point for the forward group, I got to argue against Dylan Strome here. Though he is finally showing that third overall talent that he was drafted for, how much of it is coming from playing on a line with Connor McMichael and Alex Ovechkin, who each have 13, 14 goals respectively?
He doesn't play on a line with Connor
He's
McMichael.
just recently been putting up .75 points per game seasons, which is around the star rating, since he moved to the Capitals. So I I see what you're saying, where his level of play has definitely increased, but I think if he's playing with other people than two of the hottest guys in the NHL to start the season, and Alex Ovechkin and Connor McMichael, I don't think this argument is made. Um, though I can see it, possibly a name or two he would possibly replace, but I I think Sweeney really focused on this forward group is what I'm telling myself
Yeah,
because
I
it
think
looks
you're
pretty
right.
good to me compared to the other two.
I think you're right. But like two players that I'm firmly in,
Uh,
and he doesn't play with McMichael. He just plays with Ovi. Obviously, McMichael on the power play. Um, but he is the quarterback. Talk about an eye test, and everyone on this roster passed an eye test. They don't make this roster without it. But Sorelli and Bennett are two names I think of that Dylan Strome's two-way play, his point production, his face-off percentages, and overall talent has been better this season than these guys. You can look it up. Their stats are
yeah,
just not his. And I get
yeah,
that. And you know what? You're right. But at the same time, your point is, maybe if he wasn't playing with the best of the best, maybe his stats are different. Okay. Well, he would be playing with the best of the best. He'd be on a line with the best players in Canada, right? Like, so hard to say. Not that Sorelli and Bennett didn't deserve a spot, or even Hagel or Brad Marchand. But those four names, or I should say, Bennett and Sorelli, definitely could have been on that fringe there. And who knows? Um, and of course, Sweeney definitely has his opinions as to why he did what he did. But hey, let's that kind of wraps up the Four Nations face-off piece. Um, Before we let everyone go, we're going to do our betting takes for the week. And before we get into that, I'm going to give you one question, buddy. Who's going to win the Four Nations face-off, and who's going to be in in the championship there with them? I'll turn it to you, buddy.
I I will be quite surprised if it is not Sweden USA in the championship. Though Canada and Finland both have great teams, I see both Team USA and Team Sweden as the top dogs in this tournament. Then again, in my opinion, Canada has the best forward group, so they could turn it on any game and just outscore one of these teams. But I truly think it's going to be a Team Sweden, Team USA championship matchup. And quite frankly, I don't know who wins that. It could be stolen by either any of those six goalies across the two teams. Um, that's a tough one. I guess I'll have to go for the homeboys with Team USA, but yeah, I'm thinking Sweden USA championship.
Yeah. Um, I'm not far from you. I think the best two teams, in my opinion, holistically, are Sweden and USA. My prediction is that we're going to have a rematch of USA versus Canada. And I know you remember that goal from Crosby way back. And I think this time USA takes it to
On
Canada.
Ryan Miller 5 hole.
It would be so incredible for the US to see that happen. Yeah, they beat Sweden and Finland in that matchup. It's great. We celebrate, but I think it's a little sweeter if they win the championship against a team from their north in Canada. So I'm gonna put Canada US. Although I firmly believe, like you, the best two teams in this tournament are Sweden and US. But hey, we'll have to watch. I can't wait to go to the games with you too, buddy. It's gonna be fun. Now
Oh,
let's
exactly.
let's move into the takes here and wrap things up. Right now, Cap Wizard's scoreboard is pretty tight. I have the lead at 5 points. Pans has 3 points, and Justin has 5 points. So everyone's still in it. There is a slew of hockey left. So by no means is this anywhere close to being done. But we do have some new takes for the week. Um, I'll start off with mine, and then I'll pass it over to you right now. Our producer Justin has not phoned in his take, which is fine. We'll definitely keep you posted and keep the scoreboards updated once he does. But my take is that Jack Hughes and the New Jersey Devils um, beat the Avalanche on Sunday the 8th. And I do believe that Jack Hughes will have 2+ points during that game. So Jack Hughes, 2+ points, and the Devils win over the Avalanche on Sunday the 8th of December. Over to you for your take there, bud.
Now, on that same date, December 8th on Sunday, I'm going with the Flyers and Utah Hockey Club matchup. So I have Matvey Michkov to score, but I have the Utah Hockey Club prevailing with the win.
Ooh, Matvey Michkov with a
Mitchkov.
goal and Utah to
Love him.
win. You know what? That's a fun one. We're
Yeah.
definitely gonna be watching that. I mean, hey, I'm still a firm believer that that bet I took on Mitch Kov before the season is a good one and one of the best I've made ever. But hey, that'll be a fun one,
Yeah.
and hopefully you can get 2 points, bringing right back into the thick of things here. But hey, want to thank you all for yet another great week in the hockey world. Pans, thank you for doing this. Love doing these with you. We are so excited for what's to come. Our brand is doing a lot of evolving here, and in the next few months, there will be a few enhancements and a few announcements from our end. We're really just kind of finishing out the year, and we're just excited for the next chapter. So stay tuned for all of this. Continue to like, follow, share, subscribe. If there's anything on our social media that you want to interact with, we love to interact and mention and just kind of banter with some of our fans. So if there's any hot takes or cold takes of ours that you hate or disagree with or something we missed, let us know. But this wraps up our 11th episode here, and we'll be catching up with you all shortly. Thanks again, boys and girls, and have a good one.